Hello. It's so nice to be with you today. I sincerely appreciate your invitation, and I'm so sorry that I can't be with you. But hopefully, presenting remotely is the next best thing. And I hope someday to be able to meet all of you. And so let's begin. I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Ira Stern. I'm a city and regional planner. I'm a professor at Pratt Institute in the Graduate Center for Planning and the Environment, and I'm also the chief of the Natural Resources Division for the Bureau of Water Supply for New York City DEP. So my background is in land preservation, watershed management, and I love sharing our case study with students and other professionals like yourself. And again, I really appreciate the invitation. So I'm going to just switch over to presentation mode and start to give you an idea of how New York City is protecting its forests and its water supply. If you just bear with me for a moment, I will get this slideshow going. And hopefully this works. So today's talk is water for cities, and also how are forests connected to water supply. In the talk, I would like to talk about water for cities, the New York City Watershed Agreement, some of the hard and soft measures that we have taken, and also as a way mostly to complement the gray and green infrastructure. We've purchased land. We've also established an elaborate collaborative model. And the result has been a program focused on ecosystem services for the future of water. New York City's water supply system is mostly a surface water supply, streams leading into reservoirs. We have 19 reservoirs and 3 lakes. And our system capacity is 580 billion gallons, which serves half the population of New York State, about 9 million people. The most interesting and different part of the New York City watershed is that our catchment, our 2,000 square mile watershed, is a living watershed. It's mostly privately owned. People work and live in this watershed. And also it is comprised of 8 different counties. And within those counties, they have about 60 individual municipalities. So cooperation is a very key part of what we do. For sustainability's sake, New York City has been working on developing a sustainability plan, and our most recent version is One New York. And in One New York, we have a goal, a principal goal, to protect the city's water supply and maintain the reliability and resiliency of the water supply system into the future. In the same plan, we also have a goal to green the city's parks and open spaces. So our parks department has had a goal of planting 1 million trees, just like your very impressive program. And since 2014, we've planted over 620,000 trees. And we've also completed a census of street trees to kind of guide the maintenance and replacement of those trees. Turning our attention to water supply, the main threats to all water supplies, and the New York City water supply specifically, are number one, pathogens from human and animal waste, pathogens causing waterborne diseases. And we know the sources of pathogens, mostly wastewater, human and animal. We also are concerned about nutrients and eutrophication of water bodies, and principally from fertilizers, wastewater, and stormwater. And our third concern is sedimentation. Some of it's natural, but some of it is human-induced through bad development practices, increase erosion. And so we're focused on reducing sediment loading into the streams. And coliforms, viruses, bacteria as well, another part of what we are trying to prevent in the water supply. In 1995, politically in New York City and New York State, we had two new leaders, one the mayor of New York City and one the governor of New York State, who are of the same political party, which was important. And they both had as a priority to make the New York City water system protection priority. At that time, the federal government, EPA, passed a law that said all surface water supplies in the United States needed to be filtered, except for those that apply for a waiver. And New York City decided, since we had very clean water, that we would apply for this waiver, but we were met with resistance from the municipalities in the catchment. And so the mayor and the governor got together and made it a priority to solve this problem, and they held 250 negotiating sessions, and I was lucky enough to be part of the city's negotiating team. And in about 8 months' time, we came up with an agreement in principle and an outline of programs and guidelines for programs for the future. And 2 years later, we had a signing agreement with all the municipalities and stakeholders in the watershed. And that program included land acquisition to buy more land, sensitive land, pass new city land use regulations on impervious surfaces, and also upgraded wastewater treatment plants, and also put into effect numerous partnership programs paid for by the city to fund environmental infrastructure, to reduce pollution on farms, and to increase economic development that's compatible with water quality. So when we look at the landscape in the Catskill Mountains of New York, about 100 to 160 kilometers distant from the city center, we knew that well-managed farms and forests were providing the most beneficial land cover for water quality and protection. And we knew that not only did our city need clean water on an everyday basis, but of course we needed clean food and plentiful food. So we needed to create a partnership. So we were faced with this dilemma: should we regulate the landscape or should we cooperate? And you'll see that we chose a mixture of both. On land acquisition, we really needed to increase the percent protected by New York City and others in the New York City watershed. And at the time, only about less than 1/4 of the land was in permanent protection between state and city lands. And the city needed to increase its protection level in the watershed. So we came up with a willing buyer, willing seller program. We didn't take any land away. We agreed to pay fair market value and taxes on all the land. We also agreed to open the land up for recreational uses, which supported economic development. And we agreed and needed to go through a planning process to develop priority areas, a natural features criteria, so that the communities knew where and why the city was buying land in their communities. And over time, we went from 24% protected land watershed-wide to 39% protected watershed-wide. And by looking at the various subbasins in our catchment, we also were able to prioritize areas, subbasins with inadequate levels of protection. Those are the cross-hash red areas, and areas that we wanted to increase our protection because of importance to reservoirs and water supply. And since most of the land that we have purchased, about 145,000 acres over the last 20 years, is forested, in 2011 we created, a forest management plan, the first forest management plan for New York City water supply lands. We hired and collaborated with the United States Forest Service, which had a great credibility, and that plan assessed the current forest condition of the lands, created goals for desired conditions, and also provided a wall-to-wall forest inventory to guide our work. And so the guiding principles are three very simple ones. Forest cover promotes high water quality, watershed forests provide multiple benefits, and management decisions are best informed by gathering and sharing knowledge and information. And so looking at the first principle, forest cover promotes high water quality, we really wanted to increase the vigor of our forests and to create diversity in species and structure, meaning vigorous growth to uptake nutrients and stabilize soils, resiliency to protect us from the unknowns and known risks and vulnerabilities that we had, which could be insects or disease or climate change, and also that forests store water and replenish groundwater. So we wanted our forests to be in good condition. Our forests here in New York State were created either through plantations or natural regeneration in the valleys that became the reservoirs in the future. And those different mechanisms have created an even-aged forest with limited structural diversity, a forest that's declining in vigor as it ages, and there are no or little regeneration to take its place. And we have threats by deer, white-tailed deer, a large mammal, and also invasive species that limits the understory of our next forest. And so we need to look at our forest inventory to help us understand where our opportunities and problems are. So the Watershed Forest Management Plan gave us a landscape inventory of 1 plot per 10 acres, which was a baseline at a landscape level for us to be able to identify problem areas or areas in need of restoration and to develop some prioritization for implementation. We also do a stand level inventory where our foresters will take the landscape level inventory and go into the stands to ground truth the broader data, and that helps us decide what to do in the forest and how to monitor our work. And we also are doing a continuous forest inventory of smaller plots for all trees, shrubs, and ground cover to give us some trends analysis in a shorter time frame. So essentially, our forests are overage, especially in the older reservoir areas. We lack a younger age class. We also, if we look at our species, we're losing species to invasive species. Our native species of trees are disappearing. So it's conceivable that with the damages to ash trees and hemlock trees, if we have the Asian longhorn beetle come through, we could lose about 50% of our native species, which is a real problem for the future. So how do we create these desired characteristics in our forests for diversity and resiliency? Well, the only way for us to really grow trees here in New York State is to cut trees. So we remove some of the mature trees, desired species to regenerate, and we then create over, as you can see, a 5-year period, another age class. We probably will do another cut in this forest to have 3 age classes coming up, so that if we have a disturbance, we have a successive forest. We also are making sure that our lands are open for recreation, and while that was part of the watershed agreement, we also feel that recreational activities are compatible with water quality protection. Uses like hiking and fishing and hunting, for example. And we also consider our recreational users as a security force. They are the eyes and ears of the watershed, and also that the people using the water and providing the water have a conservation ethic. We also own a significant amount of open lands, which we have made available for agriculture, compatible with water quality protection. And this supports the overall forest and farm economy by making our land available to our agricultural neighbors. So all in all, our program is really focused on creating opportunities for ecosystem services. Obviously, the #1 service is clean water for 9 million people. But natural ecosystems, we know, functioning properly produce clean water. So we feel that it's more cost effective to protect and manage biodiversity than it is to build a filtration plant. We've spent almost $2 billion on ecosystem service programs, voluntary programs, rather than an $8 billion filtration plant. And we also feel that the green infrastructure, the forest, for example, that buffers the reservoir, enhances the capital investments we make into dams and other infrastructure. So our goal is to have intact, diverse forests, protected wetlands, stable rivers and streams, well-managed farms, and to promote native, non-invasive species. At the time of our negotiation of the watershed agreement, we had some intended results that we wanted to see if our long-term agreement could promote. And we knew that the rural land use pattern of farms and forests and small hamlet areas created clean water. So we wanted to preserve the rural land use pattern, to protect sensitive lands like wetlands and floodplains. We wanted to invest in environmental infrastructure so people could still live and prosper in the watershed. And we are concentrated on multiple barrier protection, whether it's distance from reservoir or multiple reservoirs that could be isolated from each other, or regulatory, preventative, or remedial barriers, all working together. We also invested tremendously in a local capacity for stewardship, meaning instead of New York City government telling people what to do, New York City invested and provided funding for local organizations, farm, local development corporations, to do peer-to-peer implementation and education, and to make sure that we're addressing multiple objectives in all of our programs, not just those that benefit New York City, but those objectives that were helpful to all the stakeholders. But of course, even with our watershed protection program and waiver from filtration, we have a lot of foreseeable challenges for water resources that I'm sure you're facing as well. We need to balance population growth with water quality. There are a lot of unknowns out there. The US was able to reduce acid rain, but that has increased carbon and changed the pH of water. We need to mitigate that. We also have all the effects of climate change heading our way: more precipitation, more intense storms, more erosion, for example. And we're under siege from invasive species. It's changing the landscape in ways that we really don't know much about. But much of the future depends on the behavior of those people who are either owning land, running municipalities, or decision makers. So all of us can do a better job in making sure that we take care of our own business in a way that's compatible with ecosystem services and water quality protection. And since we have put significant resources into buying more land, we also now need to make sure that now that the land is protected, we have the resources to manage those lands and maximize ecosystem services. So together, I feel with stakeholders in our community and also all across the world with good watershed planning and collaborative models, we have a chance to be able to protect the world's water resources and preserve this incredible gift and fragile gift that we have onto future generations. And I'm sure that our experience in New York is similar to your experiences, and I look forward to collaborating with you in the future. And I hope that we will have a chance to have a dialogue today, questions and answers. Thank you very much.